Hello, and welcome to our Wednesday webinar, 5 Goodness Pays Factors, Why Common Sense is Seldom Practiced. We're going to be beginning in about 3 or 4 minutes, and so I want to welcome everyone who was here already this morning and enjoy some of our music. And while you're getting settled in, please, if you would, add your name, city, and state to the question box for an idea of who's with us today. Good to see Scott with us and Rob from Kansas City. Kyle, welcome. Tim, good to see you with us again today. Sarah, hello, welcome. Welcome Lee and Mark and Jerry from St. Louis Park. Welcome. Good to have you all with us this morning. Welcome Deanne and Rhonda from Overlook Park, Kansas. Krista from Minneapolis, welcome. Good to have you on board today. Again, welcome to our Goodness Pays webinar, 5 Goodness Pays Factors. We're going to start here in just a few moments. I just want to make sure everyone knew you're at the right place, and welcome everyone. Get us started here this morning. And for those just joining the webinar, if you would just please add your first name, city, and state to the questionnaire. Get a little idea who's with us this morning as we get started. We'll start the broadcast here in about a minute or so. Hello, Tim. Welcome. Good to have you with us today from Minnesota. Amber from Macklehattan, Pennsylvania. Welcome, Amber. Hello, Charlie. Good to have you with us today as well. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Wednesday webinar, 5 Goodness Pays Factors. My name is Kevin Sensenig, and it's my honor to serve as the co-host for today's webinar. I'm pleased to also serve as the Chief Learning Officer for for Good Leadership, and then also lead Interaction Dynamics Group. We're the Hollidaysburg-based partner, the Atlantic partner for Good Leadership, and so good to have everyone with us today. I'm looking forward to our time together. We always like to have very positive interaction on the webinars, and so as always, we're going to be asking some polls and some questions for you to interact with in the question area. Please be ready to participate in those, and we'll look forward to your feedback throughout our call today. We will do our best to address all the questions you may have. If you have questions or comments or thoughts throughout the session, please note those in the question area. Again, we'll do our best to answer those all during our time together. Again, we'll end about 5 minutes before the hour, so that should allow you enough time to transition to your next meeting or call or event, and allow you also to stay with us till the end of the broadcast. So let's go ahead and begin our first poll today and get an idea of, again, who is with us today and your role in your organization. So again, which best describes your level of responsibility in your organization? We know that goodness pays when leaders work together with good intentions to do great things throughout the organization. So good to have a nice variety of individuals with us, and we'll get a sense of as who is on the call today. So again, bright and early in the morning, everyone is quick to be responding. I appreciate that. We'll give that just a few more seconds for everyone to finish giving their thoughts and their input. And we'll go ahead and close the poll down in about 3 seconds. And we'll go ahead and share those results. And so again, a nice combination, nice mix. Today, Paul, we see a little more of our managers and executives joining in as we start thinking about our next stage of leading in our organization. So good to have, again, a nice variety and a good perspective coming into the call today. Well, it would appear that for many leaders, we're now beginning to kind of turn our attention from thinking about where we've been in this disruption to now thinking about the phases for returning our organization to some sense of new normal. And so as we make that shift of thinking about managing the crisis to now leading ourselves and leading our team and leading our organization forward, today we want to begin to shift our thinking to some of the key factors that, when done well, will help us really give that sense of renewal to our organization. And if they're lagging, may cause some of those difficulties in re-energizing our team and re-engaging our customers. And so I'm pleased to introduce our host for today's call, Paul Botts. Paul is the CEO and founder of Good Leadership, and Paul is going to be sharing some insights from our Goodness Pays research that will support you as you begin to move from this current disruption to a sense of renewal. So welcome, Paul. Oh, and Paul, I think we have a mute problem here. So
there you go. I got to get out of my own.
There we go. Thanks, Paul.
Well, good morning. Thank you for the partnership. I was thinking this morning as I was preparing for this that these Wednesday webinars have been a real bright spot. I think for me personally and for our firm, it's fun to be playing offense and producing some things and seeing in the engagement with some new friends of the firm and also some old friends of the firm. I'm old enough I can actually say that now. And I'm also, as I was watching you do your introduction, I'm thinking to myself, man, I really wish I could get a haircut. It's driving me nuts, and I'm envious of your haircut. So thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're going to try to have some fun here on this Wednesday morning. Of course, those of you who are familiar with Good Leadership know that our mission is to spread goodness through good leaders like you, because we've proven goodness pays. And the conversation we're going to have today has a lot to do with the research that we've collected and what we know is common sense. So what is goodness? I can't say this phrase enough. Goodness is when people thrive together in a culture of encouragement, accountability, and positive teamwork. And I think those of us who have seen and felt encouragement, accountability, and positive teamwork have more energy these days than those of our colleagues who don't see that. And I think that proves the value of this concept that we call goodness. Here's how we help organizations like yours. We put together a team of coaches that coaches your team in order to help you get better results faster. We like to work in the business transformation space. We know lots of organizations, including ours, Good Leadership, are transforming these days. We have research-based books and tools, of which we're going to talk about the How Goodness Pays book today. And then we really take pride in doing inspirational programming. The events part of our world is kind of frozen at the moment. So we do the Good Leadership Breakfast 8 times a year in Minneapolis, St. Paul, but the future of that is uncertain over the near term. And we've converted that energy into these Wednesday webinars. We appreciate your participation, your sharing of information by the poll. We're making each other better, and that's what really feels good. There's goodness in that. Previous topics, we started about leading through change and loss. Then we talked about aspirational thinking and great results through teams, coaching, developing others, and preparing for the upturn. We also did half of a webinar last week. We had technical difficulties. We're going to circle back in 2 weeks and do that one again. It's called From Disruption to Transformation. Our point of view is that good leadership is the art and science of people working together to create great results. And the topic today is right down the center line of good leadership. We hope that you take away some specific insights that you can do to spark the pathway to better results faster, even starting later today. Our objectives is we want to provide you with ideas to keep your team engaged, to help you rethink how to lead through this crisis. It's definitely not over yet. And also learn new strategies to create those great results that we talked about. So if at any point in time you want information from this presentation, if you want the slides, if you want some of the tools that we refer to, or if you just want a conversation about good leadership or anything like that, you can reach out to us at info@goodleadership.com. It's been fun to watch how many new friends we've been making with people reaching out to us. So please go ahead and do that. We welcome that. So the context for today, I wait for the day that I don't have to say this anymore, but ambiguity still reigns. Most people are asking the idea of what really is the new normal? When are we going to have the new normal? I know that this week, since the last time we talked, I've had a conversation with 13 CEOs and 3 executive teams, and everyone is still predicting, kind of rolling the dice as to what the new normal is going to feel like and look like and when that's going to happen. The subjects that we've been presenting recently all about preparing people for an upturn. That particular webinar was really well attended and had some real engagement on it. If you are interested, we can send you a recording of that one. All the leaders we're working with are encouraging innovation and transformational thinking. There's this sense that this is going to change us forever, and we want to take control of how that happens and make us better. And like I said, that a lot of the planning these days is around, what does the return to the office look like? So in that context, all the CEOs I've talked with in the last 3 weeks are saying that they're seeing their organizations are beginning to get sloppy. Just the routine things that normally were done with very little effort, very high accuracy, are starting to get a little bit rough around the edges. Sloppy is a permission-giving term. And the idea here is that it's probably the result of the fact that we're settling into a new lifestyle and work style, and it's difficult without the immediate support of peers and the observations of peers to kind of hold up the quality level. And there's a general sense that we need to get back to the basics. And so I'm going to leave that concept kind of lingering out there, back to the basics. And now it's time for our first poll question. Kevin, I'll throw it back to you. If you could collect some data on this question. Does it feel to you like your team needs to get back to basics? Yes or no?
All right. Well, thank you, Paul. And so how are you feeling right now about that getting back to basics? Do you feel like you're getting there, or the team kind of feel like they're still in that limbo stage a little bit, trying to find their way? So again, appreciate those quick responses this morning. Kind of makes us stop and think a little bit. Where really is our team at today, and how are they thinking about all of this? So let's give a few more moments as you're reflecting on that topic and responding to the poll. And we'll go ahead and close the poll here in 3, 2, 1. And share those results. And so a large percentage of people today on the call, Paul, are saying yes, they do feel like they're getting back. The team is getting back to some basics.
Well, it's reassuring for me personally to see that, because yesterday I had a CEO, I was talking about this particular conversation we were going to have today, and he said, well, I certainly hope that everybody says, yes, we need to get back to basics. Otherwise, I'm feeling really out of touch with my organization. So I'll be able to send him a note later today saying, yep, the data we collected mirrored what you were thinking. So we are going to do several polls today. I'm going to ask you what you think about some of the research that we collected and find out which is most relevant in your lives now. So keep your fingers ready for doing more polls. So our point of view from a coaching standpoint, and the reason why our firm exists, is we believe that the best way to protect and grow any enterprise is to build a strong leadership team. That's a direct quote from Richard Davis, who's the retired CEO of U.S. Bank and the CEO currently of Make-A-Wish America. He and I have a very close relationship. I got a chance to be his team builder coach when he became CEO of U.S. Bank, now was 15 years ago, 15, 16, 17 years ago. And particularly now as we watch organizations float along on these winds of uncertainty, the ones who have a strong executive team, a team that cares about each other, both personally and professionally, and that they're nimble in how they work together to build plans and solve problems together, those organizations are going to come out of the COVID-19 pandemic in a better place than the organizations that don't have a strong leadership team. I also want to be really specific in saying that this is what's going on now in our economy is helping us really see the true colors of the people in our organizations. And some people are definitely more committed than others. And some people's ability to stay focused and maintain a positive composure is different than others. And I would say in every single engagement I'm coaching in right now, the top leader is making decisions about people they believe fit on the team and people that they believe don't fit on the team. And it's important because what we need to do is to make sure that we are stimulating confidence with the people who are most important to our success. And if the team is weaker than it needs to be because some people don't fit, that actually weakens the whole organization. So we're going to use this as the foundation to move forward. And when we talk about this idea that goodness pays, Goodness is kind of a soft and squishy concept, and I'm grateful to my friend and business partner, Paul Hillen, who basically confronted us with the idea that says, yeah, that's an excellent point of view, but without data, you're just a person with an opinion. So we went about the process to actually do a reality check. Before, we used to say we spread goodness because we believe goodness pays. But now we can say we've proven goodness pays, and I want to show you a little bit about how we did that. The first question we asked over a broad spectrum of leaders, thousands of people, we asked the simple question: in leadership and business, do you believe goodness pays? Yes or no? And 4 out of 5 people said yes, without really contemplating what does goodness mean. No said either not at all or maybe. They're not sure, so they weren't willing to commit to yes. Where this got interesting is when we started asking, well, are you happy with the consistency of your financial results? And what we learned is that only 2 out of those same 5 people are happy with the consistency of their financial results. So the word pays equates to financial results. And this became the motivating slide for everything we do. So 4 out of 5 believe, but only 2 out of 5 understand how to make it pay. So we're going to share with you the things that we learned and some tips about how to go about it. Just a reminder of the research. We did about a year's worth of literature review to figure out who had been writing, or has anybody been writing and researched the concept of goodness in leadership, and we found the answer to be no. That literature review also helped us surface 15 leaders, CEOs, who scored very highly on a whole number of factors, and these people were the people that we interviewed for the book, and then we did a 900 leader survey. Here's what we landed on. The organizations that know how to consistently make goodness pay financially have these 5 things in common. The first, the business plan that the organization is operating by is described as compelling by the employees and the stakeholders. And compelling is a really interesting word. It's got energy in it. It means there's excitement. It's relevant. It's alive, as opposed to stagnant or dead and not alive. Second, the people involved believe that profitability is healthy for everyone in the enterprise, not just the owners or the top executives. Third, that we are building a culture that's team-based, where people win together. It's stronger that way. It's less dependent on superhero leaders and more dependent on teams that can kind of ebb and flow and cover for each other and figure out a way to make mid-course corrections in order to deliver on the promises the team makes. Fourth, that the organization makes timely and transparent decisions. The result of this is that people feel connected and informed, and they understand how they fit and why they matter, and they get the information that they need in order to do their jobs when they and hit their goals. And finally, probably the non-starter here is if you don't have ethics, strong positive ethics that are magnetic to the best talent, it's very, very difficult to make goodness pays. So, compelling plan, profits healthy for all, a team-based culture, timely and transparent decisions, and magnetic ethics. What I like about this list is it's really not very remarkable. There's nothing surprising here. Matter of fact, what's remarkable about this list is how unremarkable these concepts are. It's really common sense, right? So it kind of brings up the question, well, why isn't this so ubiquitous? And why do only 2 out of 5 understand how to make goodness pay? Here's one example of why we think this happens. The most important one to start the momentum for positive financial results is that you have a compelling plan. We've surveyed over 300 executive teams in the last 10 years. The first time we surveyed them, only 54% of them actually had a compelling plan. And without having a compelling plan, the rest of these things are very difficult to accomplish. And so that's leading us to believe that there are some things out there, some insights that people that we've surveyed have, and we're going to ask you. We've got a couple of minutes here, Kevin, to field some surveys on a chat here. So those of you who are listening and have the ability to send us a message, please tell us, why do you think that common sense is seldom common practice? And I think maybe even spark this, I'm going to send it back to this list. Why do you think that these common sense things are seldom common practice? Kevin, I'm going to throw it to you.
All right. Well, so as you think about those items, why is this common sense not common practice? Please jot some of your comments into the question area, and we'll kind of get a sense of what we're thinking about today and share some of that back with the group as a whole. So David's offered immediately fear of rejection. It's kind of a reason that maybe these aren't put into common practice. Thank you for that, David. I think you're right. If we feel that sense of rejection, it's hard to want to continue to move forward and keep practicing some of the things that we're doing. Marjorie, thank you. Personal agendas get in the way. Most certainly we find that to be a challenge sometimes when even leadership teams, we're going to have our own areas to take care of, and we're trying to contribute to the organization, our own agenda can get in the way of that. Great, seeing some more comments come in very quickly. Not working on the business, taking too much time in the business. That's an interesting challenge. I think, Scott, right now it's probably even more of a challenge. We're trying to work in the business right now rather than work on the business. He may not talk about common sense because they think, what do they think? They think that they're all on the same page. Interesting point, Don. Good observation. Tim shared, people want to show their value through shiny new things, not the basic stuff. Yeah, interesting. James, good suggestion here, because corporation policy overshadows their first instincts, and they do what they know to be right, to be the right things to do. Interesting. Groupthink, good idea, Brian. You're right. Sometimes we get into that. Well, the group thinks this, so why would I add something different? Lack of flexibility is a reason offered by Mark. Mary suggested making time to build a strategy is difficult. Too many people are living in the moment. And David said uncertainty, lack of confidence. So I think some really good suggestions here, Paul, as we're hearing these comments come in from our participants today. Daniel's offered the last thought here. It takes more of an effort to lead positive change if the change is not normal culture. And so I think all these things, Paul, play into what you're talking about right now, the fact that this new normal coming, trying to figure that out, it's causing difficulty in just using common sense approaches. And I like what Bo said, because people are human. We all think differently. We have been influenced by various perspectives that shape our thinking. So how do we bring that together and make that common practice? So I think, Paul, some really good perspectives from everyone this morning about why these common sense ideas are not always common practice.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate the comments that are sent in. And I just want you all to know that this data that we collect, it gets used. I write an email on Friday. It's called Chief Executive Insights that we send to our CEO clients and people in our organizations that really are responsible for P&L. And I include these comments. I tell them what people are thinking and what's going on. And it's a powerful expression of, our connection with the people who are both leaders and followers in organizations. And if for some reason you would like your CEO or somebody that you know and love to be on that email list, just send us a note at info@goodleadership. Yesterday afternoon, I've already referred to a conversation I had with the CEO. I was doing a remote conversation there in California. And the team was kind of down and a little bit struggling. They have a lot of pressure. It's an organization that's been dramatically impacted, 70% drop in revenue. And I said, well, let's go back to this list. What are you guys working on together? Are you working together to build the plan to bring people back when the economy turns? And their revenue model is likely to change very quickly based on one decision of the governor. And they shook their heads side to side and said, no, we're actually not. We're working on it individually, and we're kind of exhausted. And I said, well, won't it be more energizing if you do a Zoom meeting and kind of build the plan together? And they all said, yeah. And I said, also, you told me that you think it's really important that people take care of themselves. How are you guys doing? Are you working any less? What are you doing to take care of yourselves now? And I said, so that's an ethical issue. You can't say one thing and do another. So we had a really important conversation. There was some tension in it. And they decided to make some shared commitments together to get back on track and being collaborative in their planning and to holding each other to a higher level of ethical standards in order to role model the kind of behaviors they expected from other people. There's one way that our clients are learning to test whether culture. So a lot of the things that we talked about here, personal agendas, shiny new things, groupthink, those things are all related to culture in organizations. And there's a really quick way to determine whether or not the culture in your organizations actually helps you do the common sense things or holds you back, hurts you from doing the common sense thing. And this was probably the most important piece of research that came out of the exhaustive study that we did. We landed on one question that was a predictor of financial success. We call it the GPS, the Goodness Pays score. And here is that question. It's very similar to the Net Promoter Score that's used in marketing and quality and customer service. And that is, how would you rate your direct leader on proactively promoting goodness in his or her decision making? Once again, how people answered this question has a positive correlation to consistently good financial results. So now I'm going to ask you that question. We've done this a couple of times in the Good Leadership Breakfast, and we've had many clients that have jumped into this horizon to look to rate their own culture. So Kevin, we have this turned into a poll question, I believe. I'm curious to find out how people think about this in terms of their own organizations now.
Actually, I believe we have this just as a comment area. So if you would just use the questions area and go ahead and plug that in, 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, 1 being the lowest, how would you rate your direct leader on proactively promoting goodness in his or her decision making? And so we'll get a little bit of a sense of how this looks. See a couple of high numbers coming in, a few low numbers coming in. So I think going to be a mixed perspective here. A few in the middle. So kind of seeing some 8s, 9s, and 10s, Paul, a couple of 2s and 3s, a few 8s. A couple of 9s came in there, and a few 10s. So I think if I kind of do a quick math view of that, I think we're probably in about that 7.5, 8 range as an average here, Paul. Because again, we have a few of those lower ones where we're not seeing that goodness in our direct leader, and then some that are really seeing that alive in their direct leader.
Well, the point of this exercise is to get you to ask the question of yourself, because it's not projectable. It's flawed. It's amazingly flawed as a research question. I do have a quick case study to tell about a client where we did this work with. They decided to use the GPS, and 78% of their employees at the supervisor level and above answered this question. That was 98 responses, and their number was 8.54. Which was very motivating to them, because here's the scale of how the data correlates. If you have an average of 9 or above, there is your leadership and your culture is an accelerator to help goodness pay. If it's somewhere between 7 and 8, 9, 9, then your culture is neutral. It's not hurting or helping. And if you're 6 or below, your culture is actually drainers. So the correlation here is if you are above 9, you have an 81% probability to hit the to have consistently positive financials. So you go back to that data that only 2 out of 5 understand how to make goodness pay financially. This is a huge leap forward. So all we've got to do is figure out, how do we develop the organization around those 5 concepts we talked earlier and get that number to go up over 9. And it's an extraordinary accomplishment when that happens, and it also leads to much better financial results. So what we thought we would do here was engage you in doing a little bit of introspection and intellectually honest evaluation. I'll tell you what the predictors of each one of these 5 concepts are, and the first one is compelling plan. We have a survey that'll follow this. I'll just explain this. So a plan is compelling when people say it's compelling. And what's funny about that is that people will tell us that the number one reason they think the plan was compelling is that they had a hand in building it, which is exactly opposite of the executives going off to a retreat and coming back and saying, and using a PowerPoint and saying, here's our plan. Then the second thing is that fellow employees, if someone was willing to say, yep, my fellow employees are genuinely excited about this plan, those 2 things are highly predictive to whether or not your plan can be compelling. So we're going to ask you. We do have a poll here. I did not misspeak this time. How would you rate your compelling plan in your organization? 10 is as high as you could possibly rate it. 6 or below is as low as the scale works. Kevin, I'll throw it to you.
All right. So I'm going to launch that poll. Think about how you rate compelling plan in your organization. Again, thinking about 2 factors here: that you find your business plan to be compelling, and fellow employees are genuinely excited about your business. When you think about compelling plan from that standpoint, we find it compelling and people are genuinely excited about our business, our plan, and our direction. Would you say it's a 10, 9, 8, 7, or 6 or below for you? So I know we have to do a little bit of factor thinking here. We have 2 elements to consider as we're rating that. So I'll give this a little bit longer for you to contemplate that. And Again, think about how it plays with, do you find the plan compelling, and are employees genuinely excited about the business? And we'll give just about 2 or 3 more seconds for everyone to provide their final input. We can close that poll, and I will go ahead and share the results. And so, again, I think we see kind of heavy rating here, Paul, in that 7-8 range. A few at the 9-10, and then a few below 6. So I think kind of what we commonly see when we work with teams.
Yep. So once again, if this was one captive organization where you all belong to the same organization, we would say we need to start some workshops and get people more engaged in understanding and refining the plan so that that number can go up. So then let's go to the next question. The second predictor. I'm not sure exactly why there's funny words there in the middle, but the predictors, profits healthy for all. So one of the ways we can get that at this is the predictors are the culture has a healthy respect for profits, and we share our profits with employees. Remember, the idea that here is that people believe successful financially, when we're successful financially, everyone gains from it. So let's go ahead and ask the poll question here. How would you rate profits healthy for all in your organization? Kevin?
All right, so we think about profits healthy for all. Again, there's 2 elements to consider in that. Do you believe the culture has a healthy respect for profits? And then secondly, do employees believe they financially share in company profitability? Again, 10 being the high score, 9, 8, 7, or 6 or below, as you think about how your organization and your culture views profits being healthy for all. So again, the 2 factors, our culture has a healthy respect for profit, and secondly, employees believe they financially share in the company's profitability. So I can give us a few extra seconds here as you're contemplating those 2 elements together. And we'll go ahead and close that poll and share the results again. Here in the 9 and 10, but on about a third below 6. So yeah.
Yeah. So so it's interesting in some large organizations, institutions, hospital systems, education systems, some mega corporations, it might not be profit sharing, it might not even be in the way of bonuses, but the idea that when we're doing well, we're investing in people, that's one of the ways that question can be answered. It was good to see that so many 9s and 10s on that particular scale. So the next one then is team-based culture. And teams, what this means is that the team results are rewarded more than individual results, and that there are redundant follow-through systems that ensure the right results. And so this is the exact opposite of superheroes or people that stand out above the rest, get much more compensation. We're trying to build the idea that everybody wins together. So let's go ahead and ask the poll question here.
All right, so think about the poll here. Yep. How would you rate your team-based culture in your organization? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6 or below. And again, the 2 factors we're contemplating here are that the team accomplishments are rewarded greater than individual accomplishments, and that there's redundant follow-through systems that are present and to help make sure the most important work gets done. So again, you're kind of contemplating 2 parts of that team accomplishments are rewarded over individual accomplishments, and that there's a redundant follow-through system to make sure key things are being completed. And so give us a few extra seconds here to contemplate those 2 parts and provide your input on the poll. And we'll go ahead and close that poll and share those results as well, Paul. And so I think here kind of a lot of mid-range here, 7, 8, and 9 perspective on this question.
It's actually good to see. In the work that we've done recently, a lot of the organizations we survey for the first time don't necessarily have a strong team-based culture, and it's hard to get the Thrive Together concept going if the culture is not team-based. So that's good. The next predictor here is timely and transparent decisions. This one has a lot to do with the idea of fairness, that people have access to the information they need. The leaders are transparent with decision makings, both who gets to make them and when and why they were done, and also timely, that employees get the right information when they need it. So let's go ahead and do the poll question here.
All right. So we're going to launch that poll as well. How would you rate timely, transparent decisions in your organization? Then the two factors here: leaders are transparent with decision making, so they're explaining the why behind the decision, and then employees get the information they need when they need it so they can do their best work. And I think one or two people have said maybe they had a challenge with entering their poll response. So again, if you add it into the questionnaire, we'll add it into the overall data. Appreciate that. I think most people are able to respond to the poll. Again, think about this from two parts. The leader is transparent in decision making, they explain the why, and that employees get the information they need when they need it. So do you view your timely, transparent decision making organization being stronger or a little more challenged even now? And so go ahead and close that poll and share those results as well, Paul. And so here I think some opportunity for us to look at how do we get stronger at making sure things are timely and transparent.
Yeah, this is really good data. Thank you very much for providing this. One of the things that we've been doing is asking leaders how they've been growing. How's their own leadership been improving through the pandemic? And the most common answer is they're understanding the value of frequent and timely and straightforward communication is. And I think that's timeless advice. But for now, particularly, we see more leaders spending more time sharing information and being more transparent about their decisions. So this is one of the quotes that I love to make a transition to the last question. Greg Page, who was the CEO of Cargill when we did this research, said, well, I walk around thinking in a world where you can't hide anything, you better have nothing to hide. And I think that that's a really special idea that has lots of relevance today. And I'm also thinking, wow, wouldn't it be great to own that beach house? That's a pretty special picture right there. So this predictor has to do with ethics, magnetic ethics. If you got nothing to hide, it's really, really important. Ethical culture attracts good people is one of the ways we predict this. And employees have to say yes to this in order for us to have magnetic ethics. And that also leaders set high standards and are role models for those same standards. So now, again, let's go to the last question in this section.
All right, so we'll go ahead and look for some response here for you. Again, thinking about how you see magnetic ethics in your organization. The two elements here again are that we have an ethical culture that attracts good people to the business. And then secondly, our leaders are living up to those same standards. They have the high standards, they live up to them on a consistent basis. So we're attracting the good people with our ethics, and we're living up to the high standards of ethics as leaders. And so again, as we think about those two elements, just go ahead and respond to the poll. And again, I appreciate a few of you still with the difficulty on the poll itself. Just add it into the questionnaire and we'll add it into the overall data. So thank you for that. And we'll give just a few more seconds as we're getting our final responses here. And I think Paul will go ahead and share those results. And so I think some sense of some strong belief in ethics on the call today, which is very good to see.
Yeah, this really is the foundation. It's the non-partisan.
Hi, this is Ellen from Good Leadership again. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties with Paul's audio. If you could just hang tight with us for a second, Paul will try and restart that.
Did that improve it?
You got it. Thank you, Paul. You're good.
Okay. Thank you. If it happens again, please just jump in again. Thank you. So here's a case study. We had a client use audience response technology, and they surveyed 98 people in their organization. And we went through all the same 10 predictors that you just did. And what they decided was in order to get their score above 9, they needed to prioritize these 3 predictors. Fellow employees are genuinely excited about the business. They get the right information when they need it, and leaders need to set high standards and role model for that. So they used an involvement strategy. We believe that involving people is what creates high engagement, and that we also know that people are much more will easily commit to a future that they help design, because I think all of us deep down inside, we want to help build the plan that we're going to execute. So they put together a series of what we call lead smart teams to accelerate the impact of the work on each one of the topics. And each team was about a half a dozen people, multiple levels, multiple disciplines. They tied their work to specific ROI expectations in the business. And then they also created individual development goals for everybody. We were supposed to do the 6-month follow-up about 2 weeks ago, but of course that's all been delayed because of COVID. What I can tell you is they've made some significant changes in their planning process, in their communication processes, and they put a lot of positive energy in the organization. I fully expect that number to be above 9. And when I ask them just in general, how is business? They have not been affected as much as others in COVID, but they believe business is good this year. And so I can't wait to someday soon circle back and give you the results of this. So Kevin, I want to know if this was one captive client, when you kept track of how we answered on the 5 compelling plan factors, the 5 factors. Can you share with us what you learned?
Yeah, so as we think about the 5 areas overall, it looks like the area we would see the most opportunity to strengthen and improve is profits healthy for all. And I think the second one, as I look at that, would be timely, transparent decision making. And then the third follow-up there would be probably in the compelling planning. So if we start with really getting the profits healthy for all in place, then the timely, transparent decision making, the compelling plan from this group today, those would be the 3 areas that they would indicate based on the data we received in the polls would be the 3 areas they could see the most benefit from on the 5 factors.
Well, of course, the objective today was to give you some specific advice. And if you already have the book, you can go back and read about success habits for how to do that. If you don't have the book, we can help you get one. But the idea here is if you're motivated by this engagement strategy with common sense ideas, perhaps you can build interest in your organization to actually take the GPS. All you need to do is distribute 1 question to all employees, and we need 50% of those employees to answer for it to be valid. You could use any technique you want. If you have an internal system to do a survey, if you use SurveyMonkey, or you can reach out to us and we'll help you. Then you can do a follow-up survey with the 10 predictors, and you survey your supervisors and managers on that particular population to figure out where you can zero in to improve your focus and your results. So here's when we get a chance to field some questions. Use the chat function. And Kevin, if you'd facilitate this, I'd appreciate it.
Very good. So again, if you think about some of the concepts that Paul's been sharing, what questions might you have about how you could think about your 5 predictors a little bit differently? Think about maybe those 10 areas on the GPS questions that you responded to. What questions does that raise for you today that we could answer or provide some insight for you on? So I'm going to start with one, Paul, right, kind of as interesting, kind of generalized question. It's interesting. We've talked about how during the COVID experience here, leadership teams have really focused on managing the current crisis. And so many have indicated they're making much more immediate decisions. And yet from a group standpoint today, we saw that timely, transparent decision-making is one of the lower rated areas. What do you think might be causing that disconnect right now, even though people are trying to make more quick decisions and more timely decisions around COVID, but yet maybe their employees aren't seeing all of that yet?
Well, our most natural stress response is to retreat and to go inward and to close the door and work in silos. Even leaders who have the privilege of actually going into the workplace are finding themselves closing the door more often and working alone. That team I worked with yesterday afternoon, they were embarrassed when they said to me, no, we're actually not working together on this. And they were even going into the office. So I think our natural instinct is to go inward, and we have to learn how to create workarounds. My favorite advice is to create structure. Organizations, I know one client that's doing a Tuesday at 5 p.m. and a Friday at 9 a.m. update. Twice a week, they've got to share what's going on. The executive team, one of the most popular techniques I've seen is that executive teams are now having huddles. We have a huddle 4 days a week in our own firm just to get people connected and talk about what people are working on. So those are just two structural ideas to help make sure that you are constantly communicating outward. And then also, none of us are victims here. If we don't hear enough communication, if we're not getting the information we need, we're obligated in a goodness culture to raise our hands and say, hey, I need more information. How can I get it? How can I help you spread information? So I think it's not unexpected. It's a good observation, and I think there are some easy fixes to make that better.
Well, thank you, Paul. So again, if you're thinking about some questions in your mind around the factors, please go ahead and offer those questions in the question area, and Paul will be happy to respond to them. Questions really come in related to compelling planning, Paul. You mentioned earlier about compelling planning. It's not about the leadership team going off by themselves and then bringing back the PowerPoint presentation of the plan. It's engaging people. So what are a few best practices that we can implement in our organizations to make sure we're really creating that sense of input and involvement from others across our team?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. In the book, we wrote about some bottom-up planning. We're starting months in advance, asking the frontline employees, the ones who deal with, communicate with, touch the employees most often, and say, hey, what are you seeing? What do they need? If we were going to have a fantastic year next year, what new needs that our customers have, needs and wants, could you see us filling so that they'd be more loyal, more invigorated, more satisfied with us? So starting with an outside-in process, asking customer-oriented questions from the bottom up of your organization and letting your key managers find the things that are most stimulating and bringing those up into the business planning process. Then you can marry those with the expectations that come down from the shareholders and stakeholders. And usually when those two things meet, that's where the most energy is. It's also important to be circling back and telling people what you did with that information so they feel involved and engaged. And it's much, much more likely that the plan is going to be perceived as compelling. That's the best way that I think I know how to answer that one, Kevin. Do you have any other things to say about that as well?
No, I think that's a really good suggestion. I think the goal there is how do we find different ways to make sure people are seeing themselves or their ideas being put in the plan. So when people get the plan back and say, oh, that was my idea, that really makes it compelling and they feel like there's that sense of ownership to it. So I think what you talked about, how do you generate those ideas and then make sure you include them very, very transparently and very openly in the plan, helps people really feel that sense of it being compelling. So a question came in from James, and it's really kind of talking to that idea of the dark noise that we've talked about throughout our webinar series. And he said, how do we dial in the lack of transparency from our national leaders, and I might even suggest some of our state level leaders, that our national leaders have when they make decisions, particularly around the COVID situation. So our employees are seeing every time they check out the news, kind of that dark noise and that lack of transparency. How do we bring them back from that and help them kind of refocus on transparency and good decisions and that sense of ethics within an organization?
I think I've been asked this question every day in the last month. It's really difficult to reconcile how often things seem to change. And the latest Pew Research poll I saw showed that the general public, only 47% of them is willing to believe at face value what comes from our politicians. And that's the lowest in the history of that survey. So I think there's only one thing we can do. Well, first of all, you can stop listening. Doesn't feel good. I think most leaders want to be informed and current, but if you need to stop listening, stop listening. The other way is to actually make sure you don't repeat that yourself. So we've talked a lot about positivity and how important that is, but the research now, the psychological research suggests that reality is what people want from you first. They want you to be real first. Say things that you can back up, that you know to be true, that help them understand their own current situation before you be positive. If you're positive first, it seems Pollyannic and maybe naive. And, we've seen it when people have said, oh, yes, we'll definitely have a vaccine by the end of the year. Who believes that? I mean, it might happen, but there have been so many things that other people have said about how difficult that is that the realistic mind knows this. That's never been done before. Even if we did have a vaccine by the end of the year, that doesn't mean a vaccine for everybody in the United States of America or around the globe. So realism was what people want first. So as leaders, we can be realistic without being negative and then finish with a positive statement. And that's what we need to combat the dark noise. We have 100% control over that as leaders. So that was a really insightful question. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Paul. It does. I think the advantage we have today is we have access to lots of information. So we don't have to only rely on what we hear on the news. We can read other sources. We can read other things and be very informed at that broader level. So that plays right into the idea you were talking about.
Well, Kevin,
so
I'll tell you what, I'm not, I'll just add one more thing. I am not a scientific guy. I never thought in a million years I'd be reading the CDC website. But I have a news integrator that I really like, and about twice a week now I'm actually reading the CDC website. I never thought I would do that, but that's just part of what we have to do. So back to you. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. And it's funny you say that because you're right. I've probably hit that website more in the last few weeks than I ever have in the past. I always heard, go to the CDC website. I've never really, once in a while maybe, but now I'm doing it more regularly. It's just interesting. Good insight. So Brian asked a question around the GPS, and I think it's going to help us frame this for leaders in organizations. And he asked, do you see a difference in the GPS at different levels in an organization? So are you seeing different GPS scores maybe at the employee to supervisor level, or the supervisor to manager level, or the manager to executive leadership level? And then I'll have a follow-up question to that first. Let you answer that first, and I want to follow up on that in the second part of this question.
Yes, although we recommend that you don't ask any questions to pre-qualify the first time you use the survey. In other words, if it's a one-question survey, just ask the question exactly the way it is. However, when you want to go back and do the 10 predictors, then you can say we're going to do a follow-on survey, and then we ask that people do the GPS again. But before you do that, we also ask that you collect now some demographic information so you know who's answering how. We think it's really important, and we went round and round with our research team when this happened. It's really important that the GPS be used as one question with no explanation the first time we do it. And the most valuable part of the data is, did 50% or more people who were sent the survey answer it? Now, in the follow-ups, we have learned that we see middle managers perhaps are not role modeling goodness as well as frontline supervisors and top executives. Those are complicated jobs. They often have to do things that align with rules that don't make sense. And middle managers are the ones that tend to score lower than frontline supervisors and executives.
Thank you, Paul, for that insight on that. I think you're right. Our middle managers tend to get very pushed on both sides, and so it can be difficult for them sometimes to keep that focus on goodness. So the second part of the question that Brian asked then, and I wanted to get that first part answered clearly, is, so do you work on GPS at different levels or as a company as a whole? So first, this question was, how do you rate it? And you answered that. And how do you go about working on it and resolving some of those difficulties you see maybe in their GPS score across an organization?
My recommendation is that we pull together some sort of a leadership team conversation first. That usually involves the upper middle managers and the executives. And we talk about what the data means and what we've learned through the 10 predictors, and build a commitment, a shared commitment across that group that we're going to involve people in solving these problems. And just that conversation with the client case study we gave you, that had never actually happened before, except for one place. In the manufacturing lines, they were frequently asking people on the front lines of the manufacturing process to suggest improvement. So they'd already had some Kaizen teams that had been working multidisciplinary, multi-level, but not in anywhere else in the organization. So when we introduced that concept of executives working with brand new employees in parts of the company that they've never even met before, luckily this client thought that was stimulating, and we know that that's a super highly effective way to go about advancing your scores on things like the 10 predictors. So great question. I'm looking at the time here, and we always promise that we'll get people out on time. So we've got our next poll question that sets up the meeting that we're going to have next week. That is, does your organization have clear expectations for all leaders that align with goodness? I'll throw it to you, Kevin.
All right. So as we do our final poll today, what would you say you're seeing in your organization? Do you have that clear? Does your organization have those clear expectations for all leaders so they can align around goodness? And so I'll give you just a few seconds here to respond to that if you're thinking about it. Again, really thank you so much for the questions and the interaction today through the polls. I know we did a few more of those today, but it was really helpful to get that insight and those data points. And I really appreciate the questions as well. So we'll go ahead and close this poll. And interesting split we're seeing here, about 60-40. So 60% saying, yes, we have those clear expectations, 40% saying, maybe that's not as clear as it needs to be, Paul.
Good. Well, we're going to dive into that next week. It'll be a tag team between you and I. I'm very excited about that conversation. It's got some stimulating things in it. So let me lead us home here today. We have 2 more webinars on this original schedule here, or excuse me, 3. Next week is leadership expectations. Then we'll redo the disruption to transformation one that we had the technology problems with, and we'll close with an encore presentation of coaching and developing others, which really, really had a lot of interest. So this is just a blanket offer. Let us know how we can help you. We'll send you the slides and the tools from the topics. You can use info@goodleadership.com. And, we can also tailor these webinars to stimulate things in your team. And we got lots of different coaching options if you're interested in that. The books that we use in these presentations are available online. And this one in particular, this package here, this bundle, includes the How Goodness Pays and then the aspirational book about the bucket list. It's a $20 bundle. It's available at goodleadership.com, and that includes a $5 donation to Make-A-Wish. We're really grateful for your participation today. Thank you very much. We look forward to talking with you again next week. Have a good week.